Hey everyone, this is a video just to refresh your memory on how to factor trinomials. The first thing you need to do is to see if you can factor out a GCF. If the x squared term is negative, you need to factor out a negative. And the third step would just be to factor the trinomial. So to begin with, let's start talking about the standard form of a quadratic, and that is going to be ax squared plus bx plus c. So what do you want to do when you are factoring or eventually solving these types of equations? You want to get it where you have your x squared term first, then your x, and then just your number. So for example, if I had 4x minus 3x squared plus 2, then to rearrange that in this form, I would take the x squared term first, followed by the x term, and then the number. So notice I kept my signs with it, I just moved them around. If you had something like this, 3 minus 5x squared, to put that in standard form, you would have to move the 5x squared in the front, and that would be in standard form. Even though that does not have an x term, it's still in standard form. Your b would just be 0. So your a, b, and c are the actual numbers that are there. So in this case, your a would be -3, your b would be 4, and your c would be 2. Same thing here, your a would be -5, and your c would be 3, and your b would equal 0. Even if it's in this order up here, this is still your a, your b would still be 0 because there's no x term, and then this would be your c. Okay, so let's factor some. So we have x squared minus 7x minus 18. Notice that's already in standard form because it's x squared term first, then your x, and then your number. And in this, your a is the number in front of x squared. Since there's not one there, it's 1. Your b is going to be -7. And your c is -18. So now most of you know how to do this just by writing your two binomials. I'm going to show you this method as well. What you're going to do is you're going to multiply your a value, which is 1, by your c. So that would be a times c is going to be -18. So what you want is you want to find two numbers that multiply to be -18, but then add to be your b term, which in this case is -7. So I need two numbers that multiply to be -18 and add to be -7. So once again, this is a times c, and this is your b term. So the two numbers that would do that would be -9 and 2. And -9 and 2 would also add to be 7. So when you're factoring this way, these numbers have to be the same here. Okay? Now you may not get that the first try. You might have to erase and try again, but just keep doing that until you can get numbers that multiply to be -18 and add to be -7. So now once you do that, in this template, you're going to put this number and this number in this position and this position. Notice these are fractions here. So once again, these numbers just drop down. One comes here and one comes over here. And in your template, your a value goes on the bottom. So in this case, our a value is 1 in both positions. Now you have this fraction, and you're going to reduce that. So if I reduce that, I have -9 over 1, and then we have 2 over 1. Those don't really reduce. But the nice thing about this is now that you have that, notice I put an x there. That's there for a reason. You have found your two binomials. You take this as your x, -9 for one set of parentheses, and you take this one for the other one. So you have an x plus 2. Notice that's going to give you, if you FOIL that out, you have x squared plus 2x minus 9x minus 7, or excuse me, minus 18. And then these two would go to -7. So this is the correct factored form of this quadratic. Now let's do another one. Let's look at this one. So remember our rules of factoring. We have to see if we can pull a GCF out first. So here you can see that you have to find out in your numbers, is there anything common in all three of those? And there's not a number that goes into all three of those an equal amount of times. but there is a b in everything. So the first step here is to factor out a b. So if I pull a b out, I'm going to have 3b squared in the first position minus 5b plus 2. Now you need to factor the trinomial. So I'm not going to look at the b for right now. I'm just going to look at this piece. So when I factor that, my a is 1, my b is -5, and my c is 2. So the first thing I want to do is multiply, a is not 1, a is 3. Okay, so a is 3, b is -5, and c is 2. So the first thing I want to do is multiply a times c and put that answer here. So a times c is going to be +6, and your b is going to go down here. So now these blanks once again have to be the same, and I need two numbers that multiply to be 6 and add to be -5. So multiply to be 6, I could do 2 and 3, and that would be a +6, or both of these could be negative. And since this has to add to be -5, we're going to have to put negatives on them. So I'd have -2 and -3 down here as well. So those multiply to be +6, and these add to be -5. So when I get here, these two numbers go in my first blank up on top. My a is replaced by 3, since that was the a in the problem. And then I reduce, so I have -2, and then 3x. And then this is going to reduce to -1, and I don't really have to put a 1 there. I'm going to just to show you that that is reducing to that. And then I can write my answer. So my answer comes from here and here. So one of my binomials is 3x minus 2, and one of my binomials is x minus 1. Now, this factored has to multiply out to be this. So remember, I factored this b out at the very beginning, so I would have to put the b here. Now notice I have x's here. Those variables really don't matter. In the template, I just put x's because that's usually what we work with, but those can be any variables. So I'm just going to go ahead and change everything to b here. So now if I FOIL this out, I'm going to get, let's FOIL the binomials first. I'm going to get 3b squared minus 3b minus 2b plus 2. And that would go to 3b squared minus 5b plus 2. And if I took a b through that, I would indeed get what I started with. So this is my answer, and I'm just asked to factor. Okay, so let's do one more. Alright, this one says 3x squared plus 17x plus 10. So 3, 17, and 10 do not have any GCFs. Your x squared term is not negative, so I'm just going to start the process. Your a is 3, your b is 17, and your c is 10. So you're going to multiply a times c. So a times c is 30. Once again, that number goes here, and your b is going to drop down to here. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to be 30 and add to be 17. So I'm going to get 2 and 15. That would multiply to be 30, and 2 and 15 would add to be 17. So once I find those, I put those in the top blank. And then my a down here is replaced with 3, since a is 3 in my problem. Now I reduce, so I have 2 and 3. And this right here, 3 will go into both, so 5 and 1. And then I can write my answer. So this answer is going to be 3x plus 2 and x plus 5. And if you FOIL that out, you would get this back. Let's do one more. I know I said the last one was one more, but I think we have time for another. So this one right here, 5, 7, and 2 do not have a GCF. X squared is not negative, so I'm good to just start factoring. Your a here is 5, your b is -7, and your c is 2. Now you can pull them straight off of the problem, but I like to write them here so that way you don't have to get mixed up in here with all the variables. So I'm going to do a times c, and I'm going to put that answer here, which is 10. and I'm going to drop my b here. So I'm looking for numbers that multiply to be positive 10 and add to be negative 7. So 2 and 5 come to mind, but to add to be negative 7, I know that both of those have to be negative. So those multiply to be 10 and those add to be negative 7. I'm going to bring these two numbers down here and replace my a with 5. That's what my a is. And then reduce. So negative 2/5 doesn't reduce. And negative 5 over 5 reduces to negative 1 over 1x. Then write your answers. So your answers are going to become 5x minus 2 and x minus 1 from these two fractions.